So thank you everyone for joining us late in the afternoon for our final session of the Sustainability Conference today. We will also be having another full day of fantastic speakers tomorrow, so I do hope that you will take some time to join us. But I am super excited to introduce to you all Dr. Lisa Reyes Mason. Lisa is an associate professor at the University of Denver Graduate School of Social Work. She studies climate change and social justice through community engaged and interdisciplinary research. Dr. Mason's interests include urban green infrastructure, health and financial impacts of weather extremes, and a just transition away from fossil fuels. She also co-edited the book, People and Climate Change, of Vulnerability, Adaptation, and Social Justice. Lisa recently discovered the joys of making homemade veggie stock from and leftover almond pulp crackers. If she goes missing during a Zoom meeting, now you know where to find her. And with that, I'll hand it over to Lisa.
Great, thank you, Emily. Yeah, I just made another batch of that veggie stock yesterday, and I think when I get home today, there'll be a pot of some kind of potato, pea, something soup waiting for me at home. So looking forward to that. But I'm so happy to be here with you all today. Thursday afternoon session of this conference. I've been able to attend some of the sessions so far and have really enjoyed it. Let me share my screen here with you. Okay. So you should be seeing my slides now. Great. So this workshop is on team science for climate solutions. And I've designed it to be interactive. So I hope that you will, maybe you have a notebook near you or some scratch paper, or you want to open up, a Word file. I hope that you will drop some comments into chat as we go along, or also with a group of our size, you can also please, I think if you have the ability to unmute, it looks like you have to ask. Okay, well, we'll use chat for the moment, but probably with a group our size, we could unmute as well, to kind of participate through some of our own reflections on team science. So there we go. So I see some social workers on the call, so I don't need to do this part of the presentation for everybody, but in case you're here and just curious, wondering what does social work have to do with climate solutions? Social work is an incredibly rich, broad, diverse profession that at the end of the day is really all about helping people address their problems, access opportunities, lead healthy and productive lives. We are a profession that is grounded in social justice and in working with people to address inequalities, challenge inequitable access to human rights and to social, economic, and political opportunities. So when we think about climate change and we think about the issues that social workers work on, these are just some of the issues that intersect with areas that social workers are working to address with communities, and that climate change is a threat multiplier for. So access to food, access to water, people's physical health, their mental health, their connections to each other, their financial security, all of these are issues which climate change can directly affect and which it can serve as a threat multiplier for. And we know that the consequences are vast, they're unequal, they're unjust, they are rooted in historical and current day racism, sexism, classism. And so these are pervasive injustices that as the climate crisis continues to unfold, communities who are minoritized or have less access to resources are not only more likely to be impacted disproportionately, but then to also have less access to resources to cope, to bounce back. I'm not even sure if bounce back is a concept anymore with some of the devastating aspects of the climate crisis, but just to cope in the meantime. So these are some of the intersections between climate and social work and social justice. Now, sometimes when we think about climate solutions or the climate crisis, for some, it can get it can feel very overwhelming. It can feel perhaps immobilizing. Who am I to solve the climate crisis? What can I contribute to this? And so these pictures are meant to just stimulate some thought around the many different possible ways, many different aspects of the crisis, many different ways to think about possible solutions and how the technical might intersect with the social when we think about the nexus of solutions for climate change. And so it might be that there's a pursuit to mitigate climate change that involves renewable energy. What you see with the photo on the left of the woman holding what I believe is some kind of solar panel. So you have a pursuit of renewable energy that also might interface with increasing women and girls and non-binary people's access to STEM education or STEM related careers and economic development in their, maybe in this case, a rural community. Maybe you're going to address mitigation with the second picture through working on increasing use of walking, of biking, reducing reliance on automobiles or on traditional combustion engine automobiles. And also this is a way to promote physical health and community building and ties in a community. Maybe with the third picture, it's an issue related to changing, maybe to drought, to water issues and food issues that intersect. And so there's an agriculture-based intervention that also in this case is drawn from, I believe, a women's cooperative in Guinea that's also an economic generating opportunity for women. Or maybe it's organizing, you're not sure where it is that you're going to intervene, but you're going to gather with people on the right and gather intergenerationally and build those community ties, build those social networks and forms of social support that we also need to cope with and work towards solutions for the climate crisis. So my first kind of interactive reflection question for you to think about, and then with our group to please, maybe I would ask a few people, or maybe everybody, but to jot your thoughts down and put them into chat. What is just one possible solution for one aspect of the climate crisis that's of interest to you? So take a few moments and do please drop those ideas into chat just to get us going with this. Thank you, Zach. Zach has put a concern about destroying ecosystems, promoting recycling, composting, reusables. Wait for a couple more. Improving soil quality to increase nutritional value of the foods we eat. Urban transportation to reduce emissions, open spaces, great. So hold those thoughts in mind as we go through this together. Before we get to my next reflective question, I want to share just for a few moments about some of my own prior collaborative, because I can't remember if it was in the bio or not, but I only recently joined DU. I joined in September, the faculty here, and we moved here in July, and we moved here after 7 years at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, where I was on faculty there. And a good part of my work there involved focusing on the urban environment in Knoxville. And I worked for several years in collaboration, very intentional collaboration with a geographer who was a climatologist and a civil and environmental engineer. And we each, as you can see on the slide, we each brought something unique to the collaboration. And the beauty of it was that it was truly this kind of joint, I guess we almost really got to that transdisciplinary work where it wasn't just one of us driving this. It wasn't just one person's questions. We kind of generated questions together related to urban heat island, to urban flooding. I always brought, as a social worker, a focus on minoritized or marginalized groups, and in partnering with communities, partnering with neighborhood associations, we each brought our expertise to this. What at the time now feels like second nature, but at the time felt like a rather unconventional collaboration 8 years ago when we got started. So I say that just to plant the seed for you all for this next question. As you think about that aspect of the climate crisis or climate solution that you're interested in, brainstorm for a moment, and then again, please put into chat if you're willing. What are some other disciplines, sectors, organizations, communities, people with lived experience who you might collaborate with? Who comes to mind for you? Who might be your unconventional partners, perhaps? Okay, great. So we have education, spiritual communities, primatologists. Great. Wait for maybe one or two more. Actual farm workers, governments who subsidize farm resources. Great. GIS, school communities, nature education. Wonderful. Thank you all. City, regional transport, mobility nonprofits. Excellent. All right. Okay. Get my. All right. So now you've got this like dream team in mind, right? Like partners that maybe you already know or new partnerships you're going to create. Well, we all bring to the table, I think some positive experiences with teams, or if you're a student or remember your student days with group projects, the dreaded group project, collaboration in some form. So just again, kind of take a moment and maybe this one we don't have to put it in chat if you don't want to, just keep us moving, but recall for a moment, a positive team experience that you had. Enjoy those memories for a few moments. What was the magic sauce, the awesome sauce with that one? And then, probably most of us have had a not so positive team group project. I see some nodding heads. So yeah. And then just kind of remember for yourself, what were some of the ways that they were different? Do you know? I mean, it probably might take more than just a few seconds to think about that, but is there a magic sauce, a secret sauce to some teams working well and other teams not working well? So I invite you to just kind of maybe sit with that for a minute or two, or okay, Becky's given us some. So positive, had mutual respect, synergy, a commitment to outcomes. Beautiful. Mm-hmm. Yes, I see some nodding. Karen Benson, different skills. Equitable voice and decision making. We're a very positive group here. Wonderful. Great. So the beauty is that there is this emerging science of team science. And so that's what the rest of the workshop will be on. We'll be on looking at one aspect of the science of team science, which is the individual level competencies that we could each bring to collaboration. And I put two resources up here for you. One is the name of a book, Strategies for Team Science Success. If you're connected to DU, the library has online access to this 600-page, 30-some chapter book on on strategies for team science. There's also a website with some modules and some like application and practice at teamscience.net. But what I'm going to draw from really for the rest of this is this chapter by two social workers, yay, Paula Nurius and Susan Kemp, who are or were at the University of Washington at Seattle, and dive into what are the competencies within ourselves that we can be aware of and actively kind of try to grow in. Those aren't the only things that we need for team science. We also, if we're looking at team science just within the academy, let's say just across disciplines, there's institutional things that can support or hinder team science, for example. But with this, we'll be looking at individual level competencies. Okay, so Paula and Susan synthesized some of the literature on this and provide a framework for it. And they group it into these four kind of buckets of competencies, and we'll walk through these. So values, attitudes, and beliefs, habits of mind, knowledge, and interpersonal skills. So the first one is the values, attitudes, and beliefs. And there's three competencies here that they talk about. One is valuing other disciplines, and so there's a little bit of a is it possible that I'm preaching to the choir on a Thursday afternoon at 4, right? Like if you signed up, for a team science workshop, it might be you're already predisposed to some of this. And what we'll actually do is reflect on our own progress with these. But so valuing other disciplines, what does this mean? It means that whether it's by your personality, just kind of who you are, or maybe by your training, that your discipline trained you to be this way, that you are predisposed to seek out knowledge from other disciplines, and not just disciplines too. Like I guess that's the word I have on here, but it's other holders of knowledge, other sectors, other people, people with that lived experience themselves in an issue. So you're valuing from the get-go this interdisciplinary work. A second one is that you appreciate context and multi-level perspective. So social work is a discipline that this is what we ground all of our students in, we hope, is how much context matters, how much place matters, how much this present moment and the context matters, in addition to the historical context. When we think about environmental injustice and racism and the history of that, for example, how the historical context matters, and how any problem is embedded in multiple levels of influence structurally in society. And so this is another competency, is how trained are you in this, or how much are you interested in considering context and multi-level perspectives. And then just in general, do you have a collaborative orientation? And part of you might be wondering, like, well, is this really different from the first one? I guess the way I've tried to think about it is I might value other disciplines, but it might be that I want to go seek their knowledge, but I still would rather kind of get things done on my own. It's quicker, it's more efficient. I don't have to navigate all these dynamics and tensions. Whereas having a collaborative orientation is that you really do value and emphasize inclusion, seeking multiple perspectives. You're willing to take the time to build trust, to take risks with each other, for example. I'll provide a quick example of each of these before we do the reflection activity for one. So a couple of people on here have heard me tell this story, but my example for valuing other disciplines literally goes back to the first day of my new faculty orientation at Tennessee 8 or so years ago, where I met those two collaborators who I mentioned, the climatologist and the engineer, at the very first day of new faculty orientation. We were all brand new assistant professors, all on the tenure track. So to some extent, we had that, like, we're looking, we were at this R1 and we're looking to be productive. And, but it wasn't just that. It was that we were really, to some extent, it's a story of chance. I like to say that we just kind of happened to meet. I was in line behind Kelsey waiting for lunch, and she was talking about how she eloped, and that caught my ear. So I asked her about what you eloped, where did you go? But really, we fell into a conversation about her interest in climate adaptation. We met John at the same lunch, and then we followed up with each other to talk more and see where we had this common interest, because each of us happened to be valuing mindset. I'm not a natural networker. I'm not a natural, like, I can, if we ever have in-person stuff here on campus, when we do, and I actually get to go to something on campus as a faculty member at DU, I'll have to psych myself up for, hi, how are you? Oh, Becky, weren't we on that webinar together that one day, but because I value it, I try to put myself out there. So that's just an example. So what I'd like you to do now is, with that scrap paper, or if you're not working from paper but a computer, you could even draw yourself a circle here. Let me find my annotation tools. So what we'll do for each of these, about, where would you put yourself on kind of the circle, or towards the edge of the circle for each of these. So what I mean is that if you're in the middle, it's with valuing other disciplines, it's kind of like, no, I don't value other disciplines, right? And if you're all the way out here, then yes, I have like an extremely high value on other disciplines. This isn't an area of growth for me, right? So my own kind of quick off the cuff assessment would probably put myself somewhere around here, because I definitely value other disciplines, and I've realized also that I kind of gravitate towards the same ones over and over again. instead of kind of thinking more broadly. I think in the chat, maybe it was Chad's, had like 10 different ones that that are possible area, disciplines or sectors to collaborate with. So this is why I put myself here. Appreciating context, I feel pretty confident. I feel pretty good about this one. My social work training has prepared me for that. And then having a collaborative orientation, I'd also put myself not quite at the edge, but maybe somewhere around here, because I love collaboration. I seek it. I'm excited for that here at DU as I start to get to know more people, and in Denver and in Colorado. And yet sometimes there's still that like, but I could do this more quickly if I just did it on my own kind of, so I'm not like always jumping, if that makes sense, if I'm just being honest with what I'm sharing. So again, I encourage you to take a moment and kind of do this for yourself. Where would you place yourself with each of these? And we'll have a way to kind of share and talk about this in a few minutes. So just once you do that, hold on to it for yourself. Okay, next. So habits of mind, thinking about these. So curiosity, open-mindedness. How curious are you really intellectually about other things? How open-minded are you when confronted with difference? And this is different than the next one, non-defensive reflectiveness. How open are you to considering the limitations of your own thinking, or when somebody challenges you or questions you, about, well, what does social work really have to bring to this? Or what's new about social work? Or is social work even a science? How defensive are you? Or how open are you to entertaining those questions, or just having a conversation about it? Thinking, how skilled are you in thinking critically about your own biases, suspending judgment, reconsidering what you thought as you get new information? And then developing confidence. This might be in terms of disciplinary confidence. So maybe some of that academic hard science, social science, or other science, not hard science, soft science divide. Maybe developing confidence relates to aspects of your identity in collaboration, if you hold a privileged or less privileged aspects of identity in collaboration. And so developing confidence in both your expertise and also in navigating, I think, diverse situations, or situations that involve difference from yourself. So I will, again, provide an example of this one, curiosity and open-mindedness. So this is, what you see here is from one of our first projects together with the climatologist and engineer. We built, the engineering team built sensors that were to be put in neighborhoods for kind of localized weather sensors. And this black one and the green one were controls, like downtown and at a green space in Knoxville called IAMS. And then we were pretty new to Knoxville, and we were deciding where to put the other sensors. We didn't know how many to put. And John and Kelsey recommended that we put the sensors in three neighborhoods, which you can see here. What I brought to this was the let's pause. Let's ask the experts, who are the people here in Knoxville. We're all new here. And so while this may be enough for the climate data that you need, what do we need to consider in terms of our new communities, social aspects, economic aspects, inclusion aspects? And it became quickly apparent as we talked with neighborhood associations, the sustainability office, local environmental justice organizations. Everybody said the same thing. Why are you leaving out South Knoxville? Duh. And so I bring this up as an example of us being curious about our new community. We were total newcomers. Who were we to come in and say where we should be looking for documenting environmental injustice? without talking to anybody. And then I give credit when I tell this story to John and Kelsey also for being open-minded and being willing to pause and say, well, even though we only need this much climate data from these 3 sites and our 2 controls, sure, let's wait. Lisa, thanks for offering to go talk to these organizations and gather more information, and let's make a decision together once we've heard from others. So that's an example I like to use for the curiosity and open-mindedness. And so again, I will ask you to think about where are you with each of these, and I guess you all get to see what I think about myself as I show this on here. So curiosity and open-mindedness, I think this is a strength of mine. Non-defensive reflectiveness, I have my moments. Maybe I should put it a little closer. That's something I work on. Always trying to improve in critical thinking. I think from the 8 years of experience, maybe that's a little too high, but I feel pretty good now, pretty almost like just self-accepting of here's who I am and here's what I do. So that's where I'll put myself for those. Okay. Now, what I would like to ask you to do next, oh, let me clear my annotations or my tool. Okay, is let's pause for a moment. And it's kind of a busy slide, but I probably should have removed one more photo. But what I've done here is I've just kind of put the summary of those first 2 buckets of competencies and each of the specific competencies underneath them. And then what I'd like you to do is choose 1 or 2 that you found for yourself are like areas where you might be interested in improving. And then think about this in terms of like SMART goal format. You know, what's one concrete step you could take? When are you going to take that? What might stop you from taking that? Because it's easy to write a goal down and then not follow through on it. So take a moment to brainstorm that. And then we could go into 2 groups, or we could just, I think Emily has offered in the chat to just, like to me in the chat, to unmute people. So maybe with our group size, we will just unmute if that works for people. Trying to read my Zoom room here. And then, Emily, if you're there, I might need your help in, oh, let's see. If I think some of you are unmuted now. Okay, so if you would like to chime in with your example or any questions you have so far too, but I would love to hear, how are you going to make progress in one of these areas?
I'll share something.
Thanks, Karen.
Yeah. So I put, actually, ironically, that one of the things that I struggle with a little bit is valuing other disciplines, because I'm really strongly identified in social work. I think that we're pretty great. And but what's ironic about that is that I coordinate our dual degrees. And so I'm actually working with other disciplines a lot, you know, to help our students negotiate those dual degrees. And I encourage, you know, students to do dual degrees, because I do value it, and yet I hold this bias. And so I was thinking that I think I could spend more time actually talking with my dual degree students about what they're getting out of the other discipline that they're studying, and, you know, to what is the value add for them to their social work degree. And I do that some, but I think it would be actually kind of interesting to hear more from them about what they love about it. You know, what are the big takeaways or learnings that they're getting.
Mm-hmm. I think that sounds great. So Karen, when will you do that? When will you start that?
Well, advising starts on Monday, so
it does.
Monday.
Okay, great. Is there anything that might stop you from following through on that intention?
just remembering to do it, when the
Yeah.
time comes and have a student in front of me and I'm like, okay, I want to ask that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Okay.
otherwise, no, I'm curious in that way. It will,
Yeah. That sounds great. Thank you for sharing that.
Mhm.
Is there anybody else who would be willing to share one that they are thinking of?
Well, I'd be happy to jump in.
Okay.
I am loving this content. But so one thing that I sort of marked myself as doing well is having a collaborative orientation. But that is because I feel as though I lack confidence. And so I will sort of use the collaboration to kind of like verify that I'm not crazy for thinking like this thing might be a good idea. And so I'm always like, what does the group think? What do we want to do? And it's usually because I'm like, I don't want to make an executive decision about this. And I don't know if this is the right way to go. So I sort of swing way out to collaborate so that I don't have to make a decision on my own because I'm not always confident about it. So I think, at some point that can really just stall a process. Like at some point, especially in a highly collaborative space, nobody wants to be the one who's like, this is the thing we have to do. So I want to practice just kind of like at some point just saying like, okay, this looks like the way forward. And I can start doing this. I run weekly staff meetings with the Center for Sustainability and want to practice sort of this is a way forward with them.
That sounds great. So when is your next staff meeting that you run?
From yesterday.
2 weeks from yesterday. Okay. Anything that might stop you from following through on that? And now you've just said it in front of Chad. So you've got an accountability partner. And
one of our students is also in the audience.
Oh, great.
So she can also hold me accountable.
Okay.
I don't know. What would stop me is probably, it sort of feels like a self-perpetuating loop. Mm-hmm. That like, if you make the wrong choice to say like, this is the path forward, and then people are like, like that, then you're like, oh gosh, never mind. I'm not going to make decisions anymore. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And I'm glad actually that you have some accountability partners on here. And Karen, I can be your accountability partner if that helps. If you want to shoot me an email like, Lisa, here's something I learned in advising today, that would be great. So I think so much of this is like in social work, we talk so much about reflective practice. And that's what this is really about, is that reflection, is that being willing to take risks to grow and to make a decision, communicate a decision, even if it turns out that people push back on it, but to take the chances and to work on that muscle, maybe. I'm not sure if muscle is the word I want to use. We'll keep going with the other two, very similar pattern here. So to how I'll go through the next ones. So knowledge. So knowledge, first of all, of course, being grounded in your own discipline. So we know Karen is going to be like off the charts with this one, right? Because she openly shared that, I think, like super passionate about social work. So just the fact that, you're grounded in your own discipline. And so if you happen to be on this call and you're a student, maybe you're at the beginning part of that and you're still grounding yourself in your discipline. Of course, there's always ongoing learning to do, to learn about new things in our own home discipline, but cultivating that deep knowledge. And then actively taking steps. It's one thing to like value other disciplines, but then to actually take the steps of actively trying to accrue knowledge from other disciplines, to really make an effort to read outside of your area, to read other journals or books or articles that are like news media articles that are outside of your usual language. Is an intentional act of competency building. And then you can see this kind of goes in a, I guess, a knowledge skill building tier maybe. Of then it's like, well, how skilled are you in synthesizing across disciplines? Are you seeing that like in my work, if I think about the concepts of social vulnerability and resilience, well, there's different disciplines that talk about each of those, and they've evolved out of different bodies of work over the last 40 years. And am I able to see the synthesis across those different bodies and how they talk about social vulnerability and resilience? And then integrating collectively. So kind of like our team at Tennessee had done, are you skilled in actually developing a shared vision, coming up with questions, hypotheses, models, approaches to work together? And part of it goes back to that. Some of these overlap, they're not entirely mutually exclusive, but that ability to get, share ideas and then adjust. You can see me doing it with my body, I guess, like kind of this adapting, adjusting as you integrate together. So let's see. So this is the example I like to use for here, which is the Smart Stormwater project, where I was brought into this project for my applied social science expertise, not because I knew anything at all at the time about smart stormwater. And this project is addressing problems related, at the nexus of changing rainfall patterns related to climate, aging stormwater infrastructure, and urban flooding. And it uses, instead of like overhaul stormwater infrastructure in cities, it works with the current infrastructure, but installs like live sensors and valves that monitor water flow through a stormwater system in real time. And then you can control in real time a system of valves and gates to direct and divert water and hold it in different parts of the stormwater system in real time. And so all of that, when I started on this project 3 or 4 years ago, was nothing I knew anything about. And so it's been an active process for me to read about that, to learn about it, to watch videos about it, to when we have our team meetings together, to also not be, and this is part of that developing confidence, I think, is almost like being confident that it's okay that you don't know everything. How can we know everything? And so not being shy or uncomfortable asking a question about the technology, for example. So that's been a real interesting and exciting for me, I think, example of actively trying to accrue knowledge. There's another one, another NSF, who knows where this one will go. It's in the very early stage, but led by somebody else at another institution that's on like cutting edge. I'm thinking of the plastics session that I just attended part of earlier today at the conference. This one is not like cutting edge, like some new technology. You can see how much I know about it. Not much compared to the smart stormwater, but to like generate a replacement for plastics out of some other process that's more climate and bio-friendly. And again, I was invited as like, okay, but you know how to talk with communities about this and what, so if that goes anywhere, that will be one where I'm also learning about how do we synthesize plastic sustainably? I don't know yet, but I will look forward to learning about that if that gets funded. So let me do my fun self disclosure here. You're all really getting to know me of where am I with these 4. So I would say, and I encourage you to, oops, wrong stamp here. Here we go. There we go. Please take a moment to do your own reflection with this. So how grounded are you in your own discipline? I'm going to put myself here, actually. Yeah, I would like to say I'm further along, but I'm not a clinic. So the area I'm always lacking in is like the clinical side of social work, not my background at all. So I always feel like, oh, one of these days I'll learn more about clinical social work. Accruing knowledge from other disciplines. I'm really interested in that, love reading across the spectrum, talking with people, always have more to learn. And then synthesizing, I feel like that's like the critical thinking one. I can always do more. And then integrating also, coming up with questions together. Yeah, so that's me. Hopefully you've taken a moment to think about this for yourself as well. Check the time here, we're doing great. Okay, clear all drawings, close annotation. All right. And then this, this last bucket, the elusive interpersonal skills. I was going to say arguably the most important, but they're all so important, all of these competencies. So a lot of these fall, are related to communication skills, really, not entirely, but very much so. So do you understand others? So as you're, have you, in your efforts to accrue the knowledge of other disciplines, have you learned the language well enough to work together effectively? Can you be understood by others? Can you communicate your knowledge, your expertise in a way that's understandable to people outside of your discipline? Managing difference. How do you do with tension, with conflict, with teams that are racially or maybe in terms of gender or discipline, again, in terms of the hierarchy that there is sometimes in academia? How do you do with managing difference? How do you do if you're the one with the privileged identity or part of your identity? Do you intentionally give space, make space, notice when you've committed a microaggression? What if you're the one who's microaggressed against? What if you've experienced that? How do you manage that kind of conflict? Why should you be expected to be the one to manage it anyway? How do you sit with all those and what do you interactions as they happen? And I guess that kind of overlaps with this social and relational skills, but your ability to build effective relationships with others, your attention to power differences, how actively engaged are you? How good of this is where social work comes in handy. How good of the clinical social work, how good of a deep listener, an active listener are you really? How willing are you, if you're a talker, how willing are you to not talk, and to listen and make space? So those are some of those interpersonal competencies for team science. And let's see here. This example is from our rain garden project, again, back in Knoxville. I hope that if I give a talk like this in a couple of years, it would be filled with, again, the Denver collaborations and the DU examples over time. So, but in this one, the reason I chose this one for this is that we had a wonderful group of students involved in this rain garden project where we were partnering with a community in Knoxville that's very much a mixed racially, mixed economically, diverse community in Knoxville. And the students, they went from, they just had to navigate lots of different and experience lots of different situations as part of this project. So they needed to come up with a design for the rain garden and get approval for it and present it to some city officials. So they were like presenting in the boardroom. And then the next day they were in the community working with volunteers who were residents, neighbors of the community to put the rain garden together. They got some resistance from the library because the community had suggested that the rain garden, the first one, get put in front of the library, but then the library wasn't sure they wanted that. So then talking with the head librarian to explain the project, what it would look like, what the benefits would be, allay any concerns the librarian might have. And so the students themselves had, I think, some good hands-on experience in working across diversity in a lot of senses in terms of who they were working with, community members who, some of whom were similar to, some were different from the students themselves. And then working with the city officials, the librarian, navigating those different situations. So good range of experience for our students in that one. And let's see, what do I think about myself here? And this is recorded, so if anybody watches this after, okay, I'm not sure if we should edit parts of this. No, I'm just joking. Okay, so how well do I understand others? I think I do. I know which one of these is my weakness. I think I do pretty good. And when I don't, I do feel confident in asking. I've gotten over my concerns about admitting what I don't know for the most part. I think I'm understood by others. Maybe y'all can give me some feedback after this workshop on using accessible lay language. I'm going to give myself kind of, on the lower end here, because what I know is an area for me is conflict management. I am uncomfortable with conflict. And so that's always an area that work on. So there are other aspects of managing difference and diversity that I feel good about. Conflict resolution is when or conflict management, sitting with conflict. And I was just sharing, I think part of it is personally my own background. I am a biracial person. I'm white. Most of the world perceives me as white, but I'm also Filipina. And I think it's some of my Filipina culture that I think about in with relation to some of our communities, cultural norms and norms around communication that I think might have shaped my working with conflict. And then social and relational skills, always working to improve here. But I guess maybe, well, I already put it, so I guess that's where it is. But again, if you haven't already, if you want to take a moment and do that. And then similarly, I will ask you to now think about, for these second two buckets, kind of the same question as before. What's one or two of these where you would be interested in improving? What's something concrete you can do towards that goal? When? What might stop you? And then after you take a minute or two for that, we can unmute again if anybody's willing to share. I don't mind starting actually thinking it through. This one about managing what I shared about conflict. Although I'm thinking this through in the moment of like when and what might stop me. So let's talk it through. So I'm also an IDI qualified administrator, intercultural development inventory. And part of when I got trained as an IDI was we completed like a communication and conflict inventory, like, and I got placed on that where I thought I would get placed, which was a little avoidant of conflict. And I haven't ever stopped to really look at like the materials that were provided for me from that inventory, that part of the inventory. So maybe that's one concrete step I can take, is to go back to that particular conflict communication inventory I took and read through it and think about it. Because I will also say that it's not that I actually am convinced yet that I need to change that. I'm not sure that that communicating, I'm just not sure. I'm not, if that makes sense. I'm not sure. What I want to do first is sit with it more, reflect on it more, and just learn more about my own tendency to avoid that kind of conflict, and then decide almost what do I want to do about it, if anything. Or is a diversity of, I think that's what the inventory tells us, that a diversity of communication styles is actually okay. Maybe we're privileging a certain kind of communication style or a certain kind of way of working through conflict that is likely rooted in our society in white supremacy, and maybe that's not the only way to work through conflict and communication. So that's something I want to sit through, work with. And Karen, I'm nominating you to be my accountability person with this at some point. So I might shoot you an email so that what might stop me is I don't do it. But then if I know that I'm following through with Karen, hopefully that'll help me. So I kind of took too long to share that example, but I got a little excited thinking about it. In our last couple minutes, does anybody want to volunteer their example or ask any questions or share any other ideas related to this?
I'll ask a question because it's easy for me to identify weaknesses in myself. It is overwhelming to identify small steps that can be taken. And so I'm wondering if you have suggestions on how to approach that.
Mm-hmm. I guess the first thing that comes to mind, let's see, you said overwhelming to identify small steps. Is it that, or help me understand that more, is it that like choosing the step, like is it hard to come up with steps, or is it like there's so many steps I could choose from?
It's that the challenges seem insurmountable.
Ah, okay. Okay. Well, I think for me, and maybe that's why I worded it this way, was I am a believer in like the small steps can add up if we make that small progress. Like even when I'm trying something new with how I manage all my different work projects this quarter. It's a little bit too much, I'm finding, the way I've approached it. But on the other hand, it's also helping me where I literally took like some of the NCFDD advice to like break out all your projects into every step and like estimate time. And on the one hand, when I look at it, like this master Excel sheet I have now of like every step for every project. On the one hand, it feels like, whoa. And then on the other hand, it's really personally rewarding to me to like check off, okay, I did give that an hour. And I have this whole system. You're getting really into my brain now, and it's all recorded of like, I gray it out and like, and then anyway. So my point is that, the concrete, I really think can make a difference. If it is, these competencies are like lifelong things to develop, I think. And we're not going to get there if we don't take some of these small steps along the way. And I really think that having the accountability partners can be part of it. So Becky, I'm also happy to this way I can get to know you too, like be your accountability partner with anything you might want to work on.
Well, and I guess I have a follow-up question, and then I'll back off. But and first, thank you for doing this. This is
Sure.
really fabulous. So I guess part of the challenge is separating sort of personal from the situation. So how one takes personal steps in a situation that seems overwhelmingly challenging. If that makes sense. Like, so for example, I'll provide an example.
Okay.
I mean, one of on the last set of interpersonal skills, I mean, one of the things, I'm not sure which one it actually fits in. Oh, well, I guess it's the manage differences, the conflict avoidances. So I'm conflict adverse as well. But I would really like to be able to support colleagues in particular who are facing some institutional challenges. But the institutional part is what is hard to break out of, you know?
Yeah. Well, and I'm eager to hear if anybody else wants to chime in. So that does go a little bit to like this presentation, and this particular chapter in that back is heavy on like the individual, right? And it isn't about all the institutional barriers that there might be. Although what changes institutions, it is the people who are a part of it who can change it's not the only thing, right? Like there's all these external forces too. So I think some things that are coming to mind for me are, I don't know if these will resonate or not, but is that question of or maybe possible discomfort with like risk, like with taking a chance, maybe not knowing what will make a difference or what is the right thing to do, but taking that chance anyway. Some of it, when I think about my own experiences with something else, but with bystander intervention training, is how important it is to reflect back on moments when I wasn't an active bystander, when I didn't intervene, and why that was, and what I might have done differently, because then that prepared me for the next time that something happened, and I had already kind of thought it through, and then I was ready, and I have since like several times then actually been like said something, taken that chance. So those are some things that came to mind for me. I know we're at 5. Does anybody else have a thought or comment, something to offer Becky before we awkwardly sign off and leave her hanging, I feel?
Oh, no. I just wanted, yeah. It's hard to sometimes separate personal from situation.
Yeah. Well, I think you're going to have us all thinking about that now, Becky. And maybe we can do a round 2 of this together sometime. Well,
I didn't mean to end on a downer note. That's what I'm thinking about right now.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm trying to use my facilitation skills and think of how can I like wrap that into some kind of synthetic closure for us, but I'm not succeeding in that in the moment, which maybe just a lighthearted moment about that will suffice. And it's always hard, of course, which I'm not asking you to do, but to like without the specifics, of a situation. But I hope that nonetheless, that hopefully we can each take something concrete and tangible away from this today to think about, even if it's just one area to work on with this. And we didn't really totally circle back to that climate idea, but that's the point, is to like think about what is that one aspect of a climate solution you might work on, who are those possible partners, and then what is that self-awareness and growth in yourself, at the very least, as a starting point. That's not all it takes, but that you can bring to the table in these partnerships through what we're learning about the science of team science. So that's what I have for you. And I appreciate you sticking with us for 2 extra minutes and for joining today. So.
Thank you so much, Lisa. This was fantastic. And thank you all for, sticking around, joining us this afternoon. And I hope to see some of you at our sessions tomorrow, starting bright and early at 9 a.m.
Sounds great.